Hello. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. If I get too loud, then let me know, but I don't have to stick my mouth into it this way, so that's good.
It's a good
Well,
crowd.
yeah, I'm sorry that there's not enough chairs. See, they underestimated my draw. Okay.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Sure.
Go on.
Yeah.
You're in.
Go on.
Okay, well,
Okay.
yeah, this is a great crowd we have here. Thank you. Well, hello and welcome. Thanks so much for being here. I'm Courtney. I'm an events assistant here at Majors and Quinn Booksellers. Tonight we have with us Louie Kemp, author of Dylan and Me, 50 Years of Adventures. Dylan and Me is an honest, funny, and deeply affectionate memoir of a friendship that has spanned 5 decades of wild adventures, soul-searching conversation, musical milestones, and enduring camaraderie. So after the reading here, we'll have a short Q&A, and then Louie will be available to sign books at the glass counter near the front of the store that you passed on your way into the store. And we'll have books available there. You can grab one while you're in the signing line and pay for it after. We're not worried about the order of things here. And just a note that by purchasing a book here, you're supporting not only a wonderful writer, but also a local independent bookstore. And we thank you for that. Thank you. All right. Now, just some words to introduce Louie. Louie Kemp was born in Duluth, Minnesota. Shortly before graduating college, he left school to take over his father's Lake Superior fish business, expanding it into Alaska and making it one of the most successful seafood operations in the country. Louie produced Bob Dylan's legendary Rolling Thunder Review tours and traveled with him all over the world as a trusted ally and friend. As a respected and devout member of the Jewish community, Louie is the father of Aish HaTorah's Discovery Program, attended by more than 500,000 people worldwide, and the founder of Chabad of Pacific Palisades, California. Most meaningful to him of all, he is the proud father of 6 great children and 5 grandchildren. And there you go. He lives in Los Angeles, California. And just a note of thanks to Marc Percansky, who helped put on this event tonight. We're really appreciative of him. And now let's welcome Louie Kemp.
Thank you, and welcome. Thank you for coming. I still find it unusual and strange when that I'm introduced as an author. You know, I look behind me and say, "Who are you talking about?" I mean, my whole life, I was in the seafood business, and now I'm an author, I guess. So it's pretty cool. So Bobby and Larry Keegan and I met at Herzl Camp when I was 11. And I'm going to read you the first paragraph of the book that talks to that. It was at summer camp in northern Wisconsin in 1953 that I first met Bobby Zimmerman from Hibbing. He was 12 years old and he had a guitar. He would go around telling everybody that he was going to be a rock and roll star. I was 11 and I believed him. So the truth is, he went far beyond being a rock and roll star. He blew past that a long time ago, and with much bigger influence and Nobel Prize in Literature to throw in. So I'm going to read some excerpts from the book to give you a taste of it. At the end of that chapter, which was about Herzl Camp when we met in the beginning, this is the excerpt that ends that chapter. Another performance I remember fondly took place on a warm afternoon a few summers later in 1957. This was the traditional day when the campers took on the roles of the counselors. The idea was to teach us responsibility, leadership, and cooperation, all qualities that my 2 friends and I generally lacked. Bobby took the place of Shlomo, the music director. Though he'd often beaten the poor old piano to death with impromptu performances inside the activities room, Bobby had never played his guitar on the top of the building. Now, 7 years before Fiddler on the Roof would open on Broadway, he proceeded to do just that. All day long, silhouetted against the sun, Bobby played every rock and roll and blues song anybody had ever heard of, and lots that we hadn't. Larry and I kept him supplied with water and requests, as all day long kids would stop by to listen in the courtyard below. Seeing Bobby on the roof in full performance mode, like a maestro at Carnegie Hall, convinced me that nothing could, would, or should ever stop him. He was our Fiddler on the Roof, and this would become the indelible image of the last days of our childhood. Bobby didn't look anything like the vapidly handsome blonde pop stars of the day. He looked like a skinny little Jewish kid who'd never be anybody's bet to conquer the world, but that's exactly what he did. I was just going to reflect on something I read here. I refer, as like a maestro at Carnegie Hall. So Bobby was 57. He was 17. 5 years later, he actually played Carnegie Hall. Unbelievable. Psh. Never know, huh? So there's a famous historic occasion that a lot of people know about. Bobby talked about himself when he accepted a Grammy on television a few years back, about the night that he went to see Buddy Holly play at the Duluth Armory. So Bobby and I went to that together. So I have an excerpt in the book about that, and I'll share that with you. The most important show to Bobby that year, though, was not one of his own performances. It was a show he seemed to know he would never get to see again. The date was January 31st, 1959. It was a Saturday night, and with the wind chill, the temperature in Duluth was minus 44 degrees. Now you know why I live in California. The car we drove was my dad's 58 metallic blue Buick. Bobby was 17, I was 16, and we were on our way to see what would be one of Buddy Holly's last concerts. He was 22, and it was just 3 days before he, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper would perish in a plane crash while taking off in an Iowa blizzard. Another great, Waylon Jennings, would have been on that list had he not given up his seat to the Big Bopper. Waylon was unknown at that time, and the Crickets weren't with Buddy Holly, so he put together a backup band, and Waylon was one of the musicians in that band. To this day, whenever Buddy Holly's classic, "Oh Boy," comes on the radio, I feel the hairs on the back of my neck snap to attention. The words seem to be emanating from his soul straight to my heart. This was my favorite song all through high school. Bobby's musical interest was much wider and deeper than mine. Even as a child, he faithfully listened to late-night radio stations from the South, something that Buddy Holly had been doing in Lubbock, Texas, just a few years before. When I think about it, there never seemed to be a time when Bobby had not been a big fan of Buddy's. There is no doubt that the rock and roll pioneer was a seminal influence in his musical life. There were many similarities between Buddy and Bobby, but one that Bobby probably wasn't aware of was that each had a high school girlfriend named Echo, which is an unusual name, but they both had the same name girlfriend, which is quite unusual. It's well known that one of Bob's classic songs, "Girl from the North Country," was about his girlfriend, Echo Hellstrop. We arrived at the Duluth National Guard Army for something called the Winter Dance Party, and found the tickets to be pretty pricey, ranging from $1.25 all the way up to $2. Hey, let me tell you, that was real money in 1959. You could go to a movie for, 20, 25 cents. So you could, that was real money. We pooled our resources and shoved our way in, walking our way through the dancing party throng of 2,000 excited, withering young people. With Bobby in the lead, we snaked our way right up to the edge of the stage, mere feet away from Buddy as he performed. As still as a statue, Bobby stood there mesmerized, never taking his eyes off of Buddy. Perhaps time has embellished my memory of that night, but Buddy seemed to be smiling down on Bobby with an almost celestial countenance. At one point he nodded to Bobby, seemingly as if he knew his own remaining time was brief and that Bobby would one day take up his mantle as one of the greatest musical artists in the world. Only 4 years later, Bobby would write Blowing in the Wind and start fulfilling that prophecy. I have always believed that a spiritual connection of some kind was forged that night between Buddy Holly and Bobby Zimmerman. Though no one in the crowd was aware of it, I only know what I saw. And it looked a lot like a torch being passed. Interestingly enough, I'm going to Duluth tomorrow. Nice homecoming thing for me. And I'm going to be speaking at the Carpus Manuscript Museum up there. And the people from the Armory contacted me, and they asked me to come there and show them the exact spot where Bobby and I stood that night, because they want to mark it for, for history, and where Buddy stood in comparison to us. So I'm going to do that. They're actually bringing in somebody to video it. So I'm looking forward to that. So this next excerpt I'm going to share with you has to do with an experience that I had after I transferred from UMD down to the main U. Bobby had already left Dinkytown and had hitchhiked to New York, to Greenwich Village, and he hitchhiked during a blizzard, and with $5 in his sock, his guitar over his shoulder, and a grip. So I came down right after that to the main U. I used to come down, routinely while I was at UMD, and we'd hang out and we'd go visit Larry. So this story takes place at the Phi Epsilon Pi House. Phi Ep, the fraternity that I joined when I came down here. Their house was directly across from the UM football stadium on University Avenue. From the time I was around 13, I was a championship arm wrestler, able to beat everyone my age, even the football players and weightlifters. That pissed them off, let me tell you. As well as many of my teachers and counselors. That pissed them off too. One day I was in the process of arm wrestling the whole fraternity, one after another, usually slamming down their arms in seconds. One of my frat brothers, a great guy named Paul Goldstein, unfortunately he's passed away, a great guy, saw that I was mowing through the guys and decided he wanted to show me up. He went and found his friend, Carl Eller. The All-American defensive end for the Golden Gophers, who later became an All-Pro star for the Vikings and an NFL Hall of Famer. Because of his size and strength, everybody called Carl Moose. Paul invited Moose to come over and destroy me. And I guess the guy figured it would be a fun piece of cake. He told me later that he beat everybody in arm wrestling on the Gophers football team. When I looked up to see how many more victims lay ahead of me, I was astonished to see Moose in line about 7 guys back. He had his arms crossed over his chest and stared grimly in my direction, which made me break out in a big smile and a sweat. I'll tell you. He was larger than life. Let's see how good you are now, big shot, Powell cackled. Moose waited his turn. When he got to the front of the line and sat down across from me, I had to admit he was pretty intimidating. His hand looked more like a club. And when he locked it with mine, my elbow dangled 6 inches off the table. I had never seen an arm as big as his. Gamely, I called for someone to bring over some phone books, and I put them under my elbow to get footing and leverage. Then we got to it, each of us trying to conquer the other. My frat brothers were all screaming and yelling, some for me and some chanting, "Moose, moose, moose." Bets were thrown and everyone betting on me got big odds. It was brother against brother, just like in Civil War times. And the profanities were flying. Our arms wavered back and forth a couple of inches each way. As the veins in our necks popped and our faces turned beet red, we huffed and puffed, groaned and moaned. And after about 5 minutes, which is a long time in arm wrestling, it seemed obvious that neither of us was going to fold. We mutually decided to call it a draw, to the amazement of the crowd. After that epic showdown, whenever I saw Carl on campus, he came over and shook my hand. "You are one tough Jew boy," he'd say to me, which was a big compliment coming from the Moose. And I gotta admit, that's one of my top 5 accomplishments in life. I mean, screw the seafood stuff and all the other crap like that. This was a big one, let me tell you something. I told my kids they could put it on my tombstone. So this excerpt I'm going to read you now happened in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Coming off of Tour 74, Bobby's creative juices were flowing big time. When I came back from Alaska in July, I went to see Bobby at his place outside Minneapolis, and he played me the songs he had written. These would constitute his critically acclaimed album, Blood on the Tracks. And I was one of the first people to hear them. He actually sat right across from me in the chair, had his acoustic guitar, and sang me those songs. 5-6 months before the album came out. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young are playing tonight in St. Paul, he said. Do you want to go with me? I'm thinking, is the bear shit in the woods? Of course I want to go. We went to the concert, which was at the St. Paul Civic Center. Afterwards, we went to the hotel where the band was staying. Bill Graham and Barry Emhoff were the tour promoters, so we had a chance to see and visit with them again. After a while, Bobby mentioned to Stephen Stills they had just written some new songs, and of course, Stephen wanted to hear them. So Bobby, Stephen, and I went into the bedroom of the suite, and Bobby played a few songs for him. Stephen was obviously loaded. And when Bobby sang Idiot Win, he became paranoid and very agitated. You wrote that song about me, he shouted. Why did you write that song about me? He jumped up and got right into Bobby's face. As Bobby's friend and self-appointed protector, I jumped in between them so Stephen couldn't get any closer. Carefully, I eased Stephen back. Bobby just laughed and said, "Relax, man, the song's not about you," as he continued to sing and strum without missing a beat. Millions of people around the world identify personally with Bobby's songs and feel as if he is speaking directly to them. But few of them are loaded enough to think the songs are actually written about them. That was an interesting evening. And you'll see, I'm just reading you excerpts from a few of the 25 chapters in this book. So the next chapter is entitled The Last Waltz. The Last Waltz is a famous rock and roll documentary now, because Marty Scorsese, shot it while it was happening, and it was a special event that's now been captured for posterity. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, and if you haven't, I suggest you hit it up on Netflix. Bill Graham was a big fan of the smoked Lake Superior trout I had introduced him to while we were on Tour 74. From time to time, he would ask me if he could buy some for me. But of course, I said there was no way I would sell it to him. He didn't feel right about taking it for free, so he said, "Let's make a deal. How about you send me the smoked trout, and I'll give you concert tickets whenever you want them." Deal. Bill Graham had the best concert tickets for every concert in the country. When the Rolling Stones played Minneapolis, he gave me the best seats in the house. I took all my friends and they were blown away. We were like in the second row, dead center. And when he was planning the band's final concert to be called The Last Waltz, he contacted me. It went without saying I'd be at the show, but that wasn't why he called me. He told me the band was planning a Thanksgiving feast at the venue prior to the concert. Would I provide some salmon for it? Sure, I said. Consider it a gift for me and Bobby. True to my word, I provided 300 pounds of Alaskan king salmon for the Last Waltz feast. Compliments of the boys from the North Country. That's what I told him. The day before the concert, Bobby and I flew up to San Francisco. We had booked rooms at the Mikado Hotel, where a lot of the concert people were staying. We agreed to meet up in the lobby and go over to Winterland together for the show. At the appointed time, I went down to meet Bobby, but he wasn't there yet. So I looked around for a place to wait. I spotted an empty chair next to a distinguished-looking black man. We greeted each other. And after a little while, Bobby came down. He saw me and started to walk in my direction. When he was about 10 feet away, he started laughing. I went over to meet him, and as we walked towards the door, Bobby was still chuckling. That, he said, is one of the funniest sights I've ever seen. What? I asked innocently. Muddy Waters and Louie Kemp sitting together. Who knew? Winterland was quite a scene. Bill had decorated the hall spectacularly, borrowing the movie Weed Shottered Rolling Thunder, Ronaldo and Claire. Bobby's appearance in the Scorsese film concerned Howard Alk, who was working with Bobby on the editing and development of that project. Would Bobby's appearance in The Last Waltz detract from the impact of their own movie? Bobby thought about this, and just before the concert began, he gave Bill Graham an ultimatum. I don't want all of my songs to be filmed, he said. Just 2 of them. I'm going to put Louie on the stage next to you and Marty. He will tell you when you can film me and when you can't. Bill freaked out. Our financing depends on your appearance in this film, he insisted. But Bobby would not relent. He was planning to perform 4 songs, and they could only film the last 2. There I stood, the enforcer, next to Marty Scorsese and Bill Graham, and Jonathan Taplin, the producer. The cameramen took their marching orders from Scorsese, of course. But I was tasked with getting them to turn their cameras away from Bobby, come down from their towers during his early numbers. After that, they could scamper back up and shoot as they pleased. What could possibly go wrong? The lights went down and Bobby came out to a thundering ovation. He danced around the stage as he performed a lively, rousing rendition of Baby, Let Me Follow You Down. The crowd went wild. Then he moved right into Hazel from Planet Waves. Near the end of it, I told Bill and Marty to get ready and signaled the cameramen to get back on their perches and swing their cameras around. The cameras rolled as Bobby launched into his 3rd song, I Don't Believe You. She Acts Like We Never Have Met, and kept going through to his 4th song, Forever Young. That one really brought the house down. That was supposed to be the end of the set, but Bobby calls his own shots, and he decided to swing back into Baby, Let Me Follow You Down for the 2nd time. Much to the surprise of everyone, including the band. When I realized what was happening, I told Marty and Bill to turn off the cameras. Marty pretended he didn't hear me. And Bill went completely bonkers. Screw you, he shouted. Actually, he said much worse than that, but I didn't put it into bed. Roll the damn cameras, roll them. Right there, as Bobby was performing, Bill and I got into a yelling and shoving match. Back off, Bill screamed. This is history, man. Don't mess with it. This is my show. I understood where Bill was coming from. I knew him to be a volatile guy, accustomed to controlling everything in his universe. He resented Bobby and me telling him what he could or could not do at his own show. But I had a job to do, and I was trying like hell to do it. The uproar caused Bobby to glance over at me. Like, what the hell's going on over there? Then he went back to hypnotizing the audience with his artistry. As I continued trying to fend off Bill and shut down the camera crew. But by the time Bobby gave the crowd yet another gift by performing I Shall Be Released, along with the band and a bunch of other artists, the whole group of artists came on stage for that. Everybody that was there, and that was the finale for the show. It was great. I'd given up trying to stop the inevitable. After the show, I explained to Bobby what had happened. In his usual fashion, he said, "It's okay, Louie, you did a good job." Thank you. So, Bob's manager from early on was a legendary manager named Albert Grossman. He managed many of the top people of the day, Janis Joplin, Peter Paul, Mary, many. He was a tough guy. This chapter is titled, Nobody Beats the Bear, which was Albert's nickname. An indicator of what kind of manager Albert Grossman was going to be came in the mid-60s after a mutual friend had taken Bobby to Andy Warhol's studio in New York, known as The Factory. Andy was a big fan of Bobby's and gave him one of his life-size silk screens, the one called Double Elvis. That piece is well known and widely reproduced nowadays, but Bobby wasn't wild about it. Perhaps that's why he and his pal Bobby Newirth attached it to the roof of his station wagon, and drove to Woodstock with it flapping like a banner. To be fair, at the time, Bobby was only a few years removed from hibbing and not very tuned in to the art world. Grossman, on the other hand, knew what an original Warhol was worth. So when Bobby told him that he needed a sofa, Grossman was more than happy to give him one of his old ones in exchange for double elbows. Cut to the early 80s when Bobby and I were living together in a house in Brentwood. We'd often hang out in the kitchen, drinking, eating, and talking about what we were up to. On one occasion, I could tell he was aggravated about something. When I asked him what was wrong, he said, "They want me to sign papers, more papers." "Who does?" I asked. "Albert Grossman, my manager from back in the 60s, he said. "The guy took a huge percentage of the earnings from my songs and publishing back in the day, and now he wants me to sign more papers." "What does your lawyer say about that?" "He says I should sign them, that you can't fight Albert." That sounded like terrible advice to me. After a little digging, I figured out why this attorney was urging Bobby to sign the papers. The guy represented Grossman as well. This is crazy, I thought. Clearly it was a major conflict of interest. But Bobby persisted in thinking he had no choice. "Nobody's ever beaten Albert," he kept saying, dispirited. For a guy who was as brave and brilliant as anybody I'd ever met, he could be very naive about things. And all the time he'd been managed by Grossman, he never read any of his contracts. He trusted the man completely. So you gotta remember, Bobby was like 22 when he met Grossman. And Grossman was like a father figure to him, and he just totally trusted him. "Don't sign anything, Bobby," I implored. "This is outrageous and illegal. I'm going to get you a great attorney who will be on your side. Not only will we stop this nonsense, we're going to get you your rights back." The lawyer I had in mind was Frank Berman, an old fraternity brother of mine from the U of M, who stayed a close friend ever since. Frank was based in the Twin Cities. Not a big New York lawyer or Hollywood hotshot. He didn't even specialize in entertainment law. But I knew Frank was tenacious, brilliant attorney who was not afraid of anything or anyone. I thought of him as a cross between Rocky and Helen Dershowitz. I gazed across the kitchen table at my forlorn-looking friend who was still mumbling, "No one has ever beaten the bear." Well, Frank Berman could beat the damn bear. At least I hoped he could, because Bobby was counting on me. It was one thing to fix a friend up on a bad blind date, but this was something else. This was war. If we're going to start it, we'd better win. Talking about fixing somebody up on a friend up on a bad blind date. I fixed up my friend Mickey Palucci on a bad blind date. He still reminds me of it, by the way. But it wasn't for the same consequences as this. It turned out that Frank had recently moved to LA, so a few days later, he came to the house. When Bobby and I explained the situation, Frank looked like the back of his head was going to blow off. "You can't have the same attorney represent both parties in forming a contract," he said. "And he took an extremely high percentage of your rights. Get me all the documents you have since the beginning of your association with Grossman. Let me study them, and we'll have another meeting." Bobby arranged to have all the documents sent to Frank's office. He reviewed them quickly and studied up on the applicable law. Then he called me. "This is a complete disgrace," he said. He's got to fight this. When we met again, Frank reiterated to Bobby that the whole thing was outrageous, a blatant conflict of interest. The terms of the contract were onerous. They took advantage of your age and lack of business experience, he told Bobby. These contracts violate laws and ethics. Frank, I cut in, what can be done about it? The first thing is to stop paying Albert any money at all. I'll write a letter challenging the validity of any contracts between them. Bobby was stunned. The thought of challenging Grossman, of cutting him off, was beyond his imagination, and Bobby had a pretty vivid imagination. He looked at me like a small boy in trouble. What should I do, Louie, he asked. Hire Frank and follow his directions, I said. You finally have someone to protect your rights. He turned to his old mantra, Albert is the bear. No one has ever beaten the bear. I lost my voice. Okay. To quote somebody, I know, I said, grinning, the times they are changing. He smiled back. Then he hired Frank, and the war began. There's one more. The case went on for 6 years, and just before it was to go to trial, Grossman died of a heart attack on a flight to London. His wife, Sally, was his heir. Bobby contacted her, and they reached a settlement in the case. Bobby got all his rights back. The bear's tyrannical reign was over, and Mr. Tambourine Man had gotten justice. I'm just glad I was there to intervene on my friend's behalf. Just as Walter Yetnikoff had not intimidated me, he was the president of Columbia Records, who I shook down for $100,000 for Bobby's story. We'll read about that chapter when you get the book. I knew that Albert Grossman was no bear. I knew he wasn't beyond the facts or above the law, and that it was high time for Bobby to get back what was rightfully his. Albert was just another greedy, manipulative user, hired to look out for the welfare of his client, but taking advantage of him instead. Bobby didn't hide his gratitude for what Frank and I did. Unfortunately, though, Grossman did get one last laugh from beyond the grave. The silkscreen that Andy Warhol had given to Bobby, which he had traded to Grossman for an old sofa, ultimately found a new home. In 1988, Sally Grossman sold Double Elvis at auction for $720,000. It gets worse. Good to hear this. In 2012, it sold at auction again for $37 million. Yeah, so, thank God Bobby doesn't need the money, but... So, the last excerpt I'm going to share with you happened in Santa Monica, California. It goes like this. This is an excerpt from a larger chapter. It was Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. At the tail end of the 1980s, Bobby was attending services at the Chabad House in Santa Monica. Presiding over was the venerable Rabbi Avram Levitansky, beloved and revered by his congregation. We had been there before, and the rabbi recognized Bobby right away. But few of any of his fellow worshipers, all somberly dressed, realized that he was standing at the back of the room. Having, as usual, missed the memo regarding the dress code, Bobby was wearing cowboy boots, torn jeans, a hoodie, a black leather jacket, and what looked like a long-lost pair of Jackie Kennedy sunglasses. It was the big ones. Specifically, he was attending the Nila service. In Hebrew, Nila means closing the gate. As the day of Yom Kippur comes to a close and our future is being sealed, we turn to God to offer our repentance and new resolutions, and ask that He seal us in the book of life. We ask Him to grant us a new year, replete with goodness and happiness. The Nila ends with the blowing of the shofar, and the prayer that includes, "Next year may we be in Jerusalem." The Ark, housing the Holy Scrolls of the Torah, remains open for the entire service, and it is considered a great honor to be chosen by the rabbi to open it. This carries with it many blessings for the new year. The honor customarily goes to the temple's most generous donor. But not this time. With his ancient eyes, Rabbi Percansky scoured the congregation. At last, his gaze came to rest upon a solitary figure standing in the back of the room. He motioned the casually dressed fellow up to the pulpit, and up he came. Bob Dylan opened the Ark on Yom Kippur. Afterwards, when the last echo of the shofar had diminished to silence, and most of the congregants had trickled away, the biggest donor to the temple sought out Rabbi Percansky and pulled him aside. "I want you to know, Rabbi," said the man, "that when you didn't call me up to open the Ark, I was quite hurt. Then I saw whom you chose, and I realized you were even wiser and kinder than I had imagined. So I'm going to double my contribution for the coming year." It takes a great and generous heart to give the honor of opening the Ark for Nila to a homeless Jew. The rabbi has long since passed away, taking his spiritual secrets with him. As for the donor, unless he reads it here, he doesn't know that the homeless Jew was Bob Dylan.
Let's hear it for Louie Kemp. Louie Kemp and Nobel laureate homeless Jew Bob Dylan. Books are for sale up there, but we're going to do a Q&A first, so here's your chance. Anybody would like to ask questions, we'll open it up. Just raise your hand and we'll get to all of you. You right there.
You grew up on 1015 East Fifth Street.
That's correct.
I grew up at 1009 East Fifth Street.
What's your name?
You can tell me.
I'm supposed to be in. Oh, let me take a closer look. 1009?
1009.
So that was east, not west. No, that was west, not east. I flunked.
I went with you to Hebrew when you took Hebrew class.
Oh my gosh, I was a terrible student. I hope you were better.
I could tell a lot of other stories.
Well, write your own book then.
Question. Question, not location. No, I'm kidding. You want a question? No.
Louis, show them what you looked like in 1958.
Well, they're going to see that.
Pardon me?
Don't see that when they get to it. Which picture are you referring to?
By the book.
There's so many pictures and I'm not sure which.
Show them from 1958 what you looked like when the.
Oh, the one that the picture you gave me.
Yes.
So this is Mike Horowitz.
Mike Horowitz.
From
All
Duluth.
right.
And he brought me a picture. He brought me a
So we
picture
got to see the picture.
from 1958. This was in the Duluth News Tribune.
there was 5 guys, Mike and I, and 3 others, that were nominated to be, what was the title they called it?
BBG Bowl.
Yeah, Bull. So who was going to be the BBG Bull? And
There's a bigger copy of that in that
so
file.
that's me, and there's Mike, and there's 3 other guys. The guy that actually got chosen was Danny Kossoff from Superior. He told me recently, he emailed me, his wife had recently passed away, and he said, I got to share a story with you. He said, whenever Dinah, her maiden name was Dinah Crystal, he'd say to me, whenever Dinah got mad at me, they were married for many years, whenever Dinah got mad at me, she would say, and I didn't vote for you for the Bowl King, I voted for Louie Kemp.
Okay, there was someone over here raise their hand. Yeah, you right there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say we're from 1013.
The whole block is here. The whole Mishpachah.
We have a block party here. What's your name? Oh, so, okay, I know the Yankees. Your father and your sister, Penny? Yes. Very nice. I'm glad you came. I look forward to visiting with you when we get that.
Okay, this gentleman over here.
Yeah, I was curious where the summer camp in Northern Wisconsin was.
So it was located right outside of Webster, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
And the lake that encompassed, that the camp encompassed, was called Devil's Lake. And that was even before we went there. It was, it's northern Wisconsin.
Okay, right over here in the green.
So I'm from
What house did you live in?
I'm from Duluth. I'm sure I'm like a lot of people in the room. Over the years, we're asked if we'd like to meet Bob, and I'm not sure I would. But assuming that Dylan is not, bumps into to people like us, well, how would you advise us to talk to him? I think I just ask him if he'd like a beer or how's the family, but without freaking him out, what would be the best way of engaging him if he bumps into ordinary people?
So I'd say, depending on the circumstances, generally I say don't engage him. Just give him his space. You can look a little bit, but there's so many people that would like to engage him that it would be overwhelming for him to deal with all that. We used to go to Vikings games, Twins games, all kinds of Knicks games at the Garden in New York, and people generally, and we'd be in public a lot on other occasions, people generally respect, he's known for wanting his privacy, so people just, every once in a while people say, hi Bobby, nice to see you, but they don't come and ask him questions, because it's just not comfortable because of the magnitude of the people that would like to do it. So that's my best advice.
He's had all sorts of religious conversions. What is he now?
No, he hasn't had all sorts. There was a period in 1979 that he studied the New Testament and had a fling with Christianity. Interestingly enough, we were living together. Well, I moved in 1980. He invited me to move in with him in a house that he was renting in Brentwood in 1980. And I did, and I lived with him for 3 years. And it was during that period when he was studying the New Testament, about two and a half months after I moved in with him, I came back to Minnesota and met Rabbi Manis Friedman, a bond rabbi here, and I started studying Torah. And after studying with him for about 3 weeks, I made the decision to become observant, Orthodox. So by the time I moved back, and I flew back to California and was living in the house with Bobby in Brentwood, he was in one room studying the New Testament. I was in the other room studying the Torah. And then we'd meet in the kitchen and try to convince each other, about things, with different points of view, so to speak. And he had been studying a lot longer than I had. I was a newbie. And so I could tell I was outmatched, I couldn't answer all these questions. Well, what about this? In this chapter and that, it says this. give me a break, I don't know. Yeah. So I went in another room after one of these encounters, and I called my rabbi, Rabbi Friedman, back in St. Paul. I said, Rabbi, I didn't tell him who it was. I said, a good friend of mine, Jewish friend, is studying the New Testament, and we had these raging discussions, and I can't, I don't have answers. I said, if I fly you out, will you come and talk to him, He didn't ask who it was, I wouldn't have told him. And he said, sure, Louie, whatever you want. I said, oh, I'll get back to you. So I said to Bobby the next day, I said, it just so happens my rabbi's coming here next week. I said, would you be willing to meet with him? He said, sure, bring him over. So I arranged to have Rabbi Friedman come out and pick him up at the airport and brought him to the house. And they got along very well. The rabbi, any of the people in this room know him, Rabbi Manas Friedman from St. Paul, amazing scholar. He lectures not only at Jewish gatherings, but for non-Jews as well, who want to know about Torah. He's quite amazing, and he's very unassuming, and he talks to people at their level, so to speak, and he's non-threatening. But to make a long story short, Bobby really liked him, and that was the beginning of the process of Bobby, for the first time in his life, studying the religion of his ancestors. He never had studied. None of us had. We didn't know. When they prepared us for our bar mitzvahs when we were about to be 13, they taught us how to read Hebrew, but we didn't know what it meant. And after the bar mitzvah, we got our fountain pens and cash, and they never saw us again. So it had a profound effect on him, just like it did on me. And I introduced him to other rabbis and other observant friends. And through a process, he came back to Judaism, and that's where he is.
I'm curious if you ever participated with Bob in writing songs, and if so, can you describe the process?
I never did. He never asked me to. He never needed it. and the answer is no.
Right here, Mr. Kelly.
I'm a big fan of Kiki Friedman's abilities on stage and in the written word. I'm wondering how that collaboration with him was, and how much was he involved? Was he your editor, or did he rewrite stuff, drafts that you did? How did that work?
Well, Kinky's a real character. One of his, for those of you who don't know, his original band was called Kinky Friedman and the Texas Jew Boys. And one of his songs from that era, which still my favorite song of his, is called "They Ain't Making Jews Like Jesus Anymore." It's a satire, but a lot of the songs are. Anyway, Kinky was the only person I knew when I decided to write this book that had written books and published them. So I called him and he said, "Yeah, you got great stories. You should write the book." Absolutely. So he said, I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Just sit down and write your stories." He said, "Nobody knows them but you. Just write them." He said, "I'll look at them afterwards if you want me to." So that's what I did. I sat down. It took me about 6 months. Interestingly enough, I did it. I wrote the whole book on the Notes app on my iPhone. Held the phone with one hand, and I used my right thumb to do. The whole book was done with my right thumb. You don't want a thumb on the rest with me now. It's really strong. And that's what I did. And then Kinky looked at it about 4 or 5 chapters. He said, "It's really good." He made some comments and a few changes, but that was it. And then eventually I got a professional editor out of New York, and her and I went through the whole thing for about 6 weeks and just cleaned it up, and that was it.
Right here.
I heard a interview with the Coen brothers about Inside Llewyn Davis. They were talking about Herzl Camp, and they claimed in the interview that that had no influence on their musical taste, that it was all strictly very traditional religious music, and I don't know whether that was kind of their in-joke, and it doesn't sound like from your you're talking about that was a musical experience you had?
You mean they're saying that the music at Herzl was?
There was like no kind of traditional camp music, it was all just,
Well, there's other people here in the audience who were at Herzl with me, Dick Holmes being one. My recollection is, we sang, it was like a Zionist camp, I mean, and it was very much into Israel. This was the early days of Israel. But we sang Hebrew songs and Jewish songs. They didn't sing, pop music at the camp. Bobby sang pop music, yeah. But it wasn't camp directed, it was Bobby directed. Yeah.
I think there's something I want to say and ask. Channel 2 will sometimes show, there's that famous talent show 57 and 58 where they close the curtain like one of the teachers. Where Bobby, they show.
Oh, you're talking about Hibbing.
Yeah, Hibbing, up in Hibbing, yeah. So, and I wanted to say, I suppose you were backstage in the audience, but, so there's 8-minute film that Channel 2 sometimes shows Bob Dylan standing at the piano, singing that song, The Little Richard.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious you're watching a genius. A musical genius is something just extraordinary.
So back in those days,
Yeah.
we were too young to go to bars or clubs.
Yeah.
So very often they had open houses, which was the norm back then. One of the kids would say, after we got done, hanging out at the London Inn in Duluth as long as we could before they kicked us out of there, somebody would say, let's go to my house for an open house. And so we'd go, and this was, not only in Duluth, but when we came to Minneapolis and St. Paul, it was a very common thing. We'd go there. Very often there was pianos in those homes. And as soon as Bobby would spot the piano, he'd make a beeline for it.
Oh yeah, but this was, the Hibbing High School.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just telling you I'm just telling you what he was like back then in that same time period. He would sing rock and roll songs. Now these are houses.
Yeah.
Nice refined Jewish people who weren't used to hearing rock and roll played on their pianos. They had show tunes and Beethoven and who knows what, highbrow stuff. And he'd come in there and start playing a Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and inevitably he'd go to Jerry Lee Lewis, start pounding on the piano, screaming, and then we'd get kicked off.
Is he still friends, or is he friends with Martin Scorsese and
they obviously know each other, and Martin worked on this new movie that just came out, the Rolling Thunder Review. I would, the more acquaintances than friends, I would say.
Because that No Direction Home, I just love that.
Yes.
Anybody else? That's about it. Okay, I want to thank Majors and Quinn Booksellers for putting this on. Annie, and I want to bring Courtney back up here. She'll wrap up the evening. You guys were a great crowd. Louie Kemp will be signing over there. See me if you want. We're going to Duluth tomorrow if you'd like information about that. And thank you all. Courtney.
Yeah, thank you so much. Oh, did I shut this off? Thank you to Marc and to Louie. That was wonderful reading and Q&A. Louie will be signing at that glass countertop. And if you don't have a book yet, want to grab one while you're in line, that's totally cool. And then make your way to register from there. We're not worried about the order. Just want to get you in line for signing. So thanks so much. We'll see you over there.